So, the quick little history here. My name is Nathan Marchand, author of such books as you see up here. I'm also a podcaster, host of such shows as the Monster Island Film Vault, which has some audio drama segments on it. And I just launched a new show on Tokusatsu TV called Henshin Power V3. And I am the new moderator of this panel. I inherited from Mr. Riebe over here. Yeah, the old guy. But I'm not the only moderator. I have my co-moderator here is.
What was my name again, Nate? Thank you. My name is Donny Winter. Sorry, we were supposed to rehearse this. Sorry. Okay, for real. My name is Daniel DiManna. Among other things, I am the creator and author of the Godzilla Novelization Project, which is an ongoing creative endeavor to create. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
He never believes me that he's the most popular guy here.
That is so not true. That's not true. Y'all are wonderful, thank you. But for anyone who doesn't know, this is an ongoing creative endeavor to, as the name would imply, novelize all the Godzilla films and share them all online for free. I'm also an academic writer on topics of monster films, and I've written for various magazines. I've written for some online stuff. Kaiju United. I have not got anything on Kaiju United published yet, but I have a couple articles in the wings ready to go. So that's going to be happening. I have a couple of book projects in the work. I'm hoping that the next time I'm here next year, I'll have a nice physical book to put in front of me. That's all I can say for now, but fingers crossed.
So, my name is Donny Winter. I am the host of a podcast titled Goryo with Godzilla. So this is my first time being on the Kaiju Writers panel, so I just want to graciously thank these wonderful human beings for inviting me on. I am a poet. I also had an opportunity to write for a Godzilla comic, which I'm still kind of mind-boggled over. But I'm really excited to be here and excited to nerd out with all of you about writing. Yeah.
Old guy.
Okay, well, there's my introduction. I'm the old guy. Yeah, so anyway, so the Writers Panel, I started this panel back in 2012 for G-Fest. Because one thing I was really kind of dismayed about is that you come to this convention and like say if you're a sculptor, a modeler, a costume person, independent filmmaker, whatever, you all got a venue somewhere for us writers. We're the only ones kind of got left out. This convention's in, you're talking 2012, convention started in 1995, so you got a long stretch. There was like nothing for new writers. And so I thought, well, let's change that. So I started the Writers Panel back in 2012. And so Nathan and Danny have very graciously taken over for me as the moderators for this. Yeah. So anyway,
it was passed on to us.
Yes. I had to give you something in my will. It wasn't going to be money. But anyway, so yeah, I self-published my own kaiju novels, and these two are featuring as far as my yearly giveaway. This is my latest novel right here. This is my original one. So if you guys are interested in getting a free book after the panel is right up there, I'm like, I don't have to bring a whole lot because I have to bring a lot of books that are kind of heavy. But like kind of the first 5 for each of these will get a free copy if you're interested. So let's get the bell going.
No. Our fifth man is here.
Oh, yes.
I am so sorry. I got turned around.
Hey, don't feel bad. The other panel went into overtime and the crowd was so thick we ended up getting delayed by a couple of minutes.
Oh, perfect. Well, hello everybody. I'm Dane Kroll. Good to meet you.
What do you do, Mr. Dane Kroll?
Okay, so I have several different books out here. As you see, we just released a new comic book called Digital Senshi Kaiju Breaker that ties into the Kaiju Assault card game, along with my own Kaiju book series called Realm of Goryo. It's kind of a Showa era, Game of Thrones type of combination.
That's cool.
So our job from here on out for the rest of this thing is to sit and talk with and listen to you. This is the end of the self-promotion chunk. The reason that this panel exists and the reason why all of us writers are up here is for all of you. Whether you have a passing interest in writing, whether you are actively trying to be a writer, you're writing a story now, whether it's fan fiction or an original story, a novel, a screenplay, and a comic, anything that you're writing that you might have questions about or want to try to find some inspiration from and compare some notes, we're up here to be a resource for you, and that's what we're going to do.
And we will take questions on both the craft and the business side of writing, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be kaiju specific, necessarily. So, we'd like to ask the first question. I saw your hand first.
What would you say is your personal level of approach in characterizing a kaiju writing approach? Right, on screen you can see their, emotions, perhaps motivation. When you're writing to that, you want to expect what only you're going to want to express these creatures that are actually really alien to us.
Anyone want to take that first? Or?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one. Yeah, that was a question I had when I first started writing Godzilla fan fiction back in the 90s. It's like, well, what can I do? Like you said, this is a visual medium. And the way I figured to get around it is to get into the psyche of the animal. So, what I do with my characters, I first come up with the concept, like in this one right here, I Shall Not Mate. It came from the concept of kaiju, because usually kaiju are always coming to our cities and destroying our cities and so forth. And I thought, well, let's do something in reverse where he actually is withdrawn for everybody else rather than coming out to us. And so I always nicknamed him the reclusive kaiju. So once you come up with the concept for your monster, then you really are now got a nice little platform. You can start fleshing out the details, and this is first with the creative process becomes fun. But the first step is to come up with a concept. Like I have a reclusive kaiju, I have a cowardly kaiju, and then I got others that are like apex predators, And another thing I would definitely recommend, if you really want to make certain your monsters have an animal nature, is watch videos of animals on YouTube. Like one point I was at I had a writer's block on how to proceed with this battle between the two monsters, and I thought, well, I can't just have them keep punching, so I wouldn't watch battles between Komodo dragons and see how they fought. It's like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to incorporate that in my book. So, that's how I thought about it. Like I said, first thing, come up with a key concept, and then after that, it gets fun.
All right. Unless anybody else really wants to get onto that, I think for the sake of time, we're going to try to limit each response to 1 or 2 people to get as many questions as possible.
I'm gonna try to follow up with
Okay.
that. I like to watch the animal videos, see how animals fight. But also when it comes to description, we've seen the new Empire, King Kong was very humanistic. It comes to choosing the words wisely of how to describe that they're moving around. Are they describing more human? Are they moving more wild and erratic? But also for the fighting, I also like to watch professional wrestling.
Yes.
To help describe. It gets a little hard when you start naming. King Kong can't necessarily do an FU to somebody, but it's scary.
Well, it's the attitude adjustment.
That is true. It's the attitude adjustment now.
Yeah. But actually, I just a few months ago, I watched Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy. All those kaiju are professional wrestlers in another life. I'm just saying. All right, who's next? I saw your hand.
2 questions. One, do you have any tips when it comes to getting across the size, scope, and weight of a kaiju in written format? And 2, mainly for the Godzilla adaptation. What's it like adapting a visual format to a written format and vice versa?
Okay, so I'll tackle your first question here. I think a lot of what you're talking about communicating the size of it. It's going to go, since it's obviously prose, it's going to go to word choices. Be very particular about how you're describing the scene. But I also do think that, much like with a visual medium, you need to provide something that contrasts that. So you need to choose the right words, but then you need to have things in the scene to communicate the size and the weight of it. So, just like you would in a film, if you have, say, a bus. That's a good reference point. In fact, Danny used to use buses as a unit of measurement. He's done that on my podcast. So, something that we all see every day, we understand it, and that can offer perspective. So, if you have a kaiju and you say that his hand was big enough to grab a bus and pick it up, that gives us an idea of what it is. But if it's smaller and it's only, it needs both arms to get under it and bench press it, that also gives us an idea. Also gives us an idea of their strength levels and things like that. But ultimately, like I said, it goes down to your word choice.
Oh, okay, yeah, he's got an example. Yeah, so here's an example, because I had that exact same question run through my mind, and I decided to use that really as a thought experiment. Like, okay, how do I do this in words to make it sound like you were dealing with a giant monster? So this is from chapter 1 of my current book, and what's happening here in the scenes we have, it starts out with a giant sea monster, that's this guy right here, poking his head above the water and taking a deep breath of air. And so this is how I described it. He thrusts his head to the surface. The tips of the waves reflect the sun like glass. Goryo breathed in the warm, salty air. The sound rushing through his nostrils was moist and deep like the wind being sucked into wet caverns. So you kind of compare his nostrils like the size of a cave. And of course everyone knows how big a cave is, and then you figure, okay, that's his science passage. Like, this is big. So there's things like that you can try doing, you know. And as I said, you're actually kind of similar to something that actually makes writing this type of genre fun, is asking yourself those questions and then like Nathan was saying, okay, I think it's a good comparison.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out, Neil, with how you did it is using descriptive words, metaphors, you know, to a certain extent allegory there, instead of just raw numbers, just saying like, oh, the nostrils were 6 feet in diameter or something like that. It's much more interesting to read that, because otherwise it comes across more like a science textbook, which is not what you want when you're reading fiction. Go again.
Honestly, I would echo that. I would say metaphor is an excellent way to do it, comparing it to something that you know, something that's visual, because kaiju, whether you're seeing them or you're reading about them, are it's something that we can't see. It's something we can't see in the real world, and so in order to convey it, you have to use, well, have to, but it's an option, to use real world, you know, quote unquote measurements, things that you're familiar with. Make it relatable. Compare it to something that a human would understand and would see and would feel. And that can be anything, not just visuals. That could be an odor, right? It could be anything. Compare it to something you smell, something you touch, something, anything like that. Find a way to do it, but also it's worth noting that, and this is definitely something every writer has kind of had to go through, don't over-describe it. Don't over-describe it, because this is, you know, less is more is a cliche, but it's a cliche because it works. If you spend 2 paragraphs describing the color of a monster's eyeball, then you're wasting the audience's time. Nobody really wants to sit and read, you know, an entire chapter just about the size of a monster's hand. You know, you don't want to do that. You want to be respectful of the audience, and also not completely. You want to make sure that you convey what you want to say in as few words as possible, as effectively as possible, because you want to keep moving the story along. You don't want to halt it just to describe the smell the monster gives off or its presence. You want to convey it, and then you want to get on with your story. Because the other aspect of that is you do want to respect your audience. And you also need to trust that they're going to understand what you're saying, but in order for them to understand what you're saying, you've got to put in the work. And you have to describe it right, and you have to describe it effectively. Use relatable things. And you do bring up a good point, because kaiju is a thoroughly visual medium. If you're doing that, you have to find a good balance between the description and not falling into the trap of, you know, overly expository purple prose, right? You don't want to get too detailed, and you also don't want to make it too, like, you know, you don't want it to just go on and on and on. The claws were compared to this on it's sparkling like a such and such on a summer's day in September, it was raining, you know, whatever. You don't want to keep going like that. Trust that the audience will get what you're going to say, and then move forward from there. You were going to say something.
I just wanted to ask one thing really quickly. I think verbs are our best friends. And you can kind of convey the gravity of something simply by tinkering around with the verbs, right? So like, instead of saying Godzilla is like stomping through the city, maybe Godzilla is looming against the horizon, right?
Yes.
Like that kind of allows you to visualize Godzilla's size and the fact that he's just kind of dissociated from the city-ish. Hopefully that makes sense.
Evocative terminology, evocative adjectives are also things. You don't want to go super crazy on the adjectives, because then you start to notice it as a reader, and you're like, man, this guy is describing every word with another word, and it starts to become a pattern, and you don't want to do that. You want to keep things fresh. But yeah, definitely finding a way to describe things without using the normal words. A good trick that I've sometimes used is find a word that describes, if you just use the word looming as a good example. Take a word like looming or something that's a little bit more commonly used and plug it into, you know, Microsoft Word, or even just Google it and look up synonyms. And the more, you have to find a balance. You don't want to pick something that no one's going to understand. You know, you don't want to get too esoteric with it, kind of like the word esoteric. And You don't want to confuse people, but finding uncommon words and uncommon ways to say something that are still evocative, if those things are still evocative, that will stick in the audience's mind, and it'll paint a picture that a normal or general word absolutely will not. Well, I answered that. I did.
Well, I've seen several hands go up. Oh, her? Okay.
So obviously, everybody kind of agree you all have your own self-doubt, self-criticism, but now with social media, it becomes amplified. How do you all handle that criticism? You put your work out there and sometimes get feedback that was not what we were expecting, and how do you use that and persevere, the team doesn't know you do things, like just how do you handle feedback?
I think one thing that I've learned as both a writer and a podcaster when it comes to that is learn to filter out the good faith and the bad faith criticisms, because some people are just going to go on there and they're just going to criticize and insult you. If they get personal about it, you know that it's probably a bad faith argument, because it's just like in debate class when they tell you to avoid ad hominems because you just bypass the argument and insult the person. And that's not something you want. But if someone is giving you valuable feedback on your work, take that into consideration and make sure that it's actually true. And if it is, decide what you can do to address that in the future. But it would be very unwise to completely ignore the criticisms. Now, I do think in terms of getting critiques on your work, it's probably better to get it from colleagues and friends, because I think they know you a little bit better, and I think they're a little more trustworthy. But definitely do take audience feedback. But like I said, make sure it's good faith.
I'll echo. I think this is a question that briefly we should all address, because it's a very personal question. For me, it's kind of echoing what Nate said. It's about understanding and interpreting the difference between, and I'm going to be blunt here for the sake of comedy. It's the difference between this sucks and this sucks, but here's why. And this sucks, here's why, and here's how you can make it better. Those are three completely different things. And hopefully you're not hearing people say, it sucks, and here's how you can fix it. You're getting something a little bit more nicely phrased than that, but the internet being what it is, we are not always thus lucky. So it really comes down to, I think a big component of it is confidence. Because if you can put out something that you worked on, you can share it with the world, that is already a level of bravery and confidence that a lot of people struggle with, including the people who regularly do it. We've all had that. Everybody on this panel, I promise you, has had that moment probably many times.
And I know a lot of people in this room have dealt with that too.
It's yeah, absolutely. So one thing I'll say before I pass it along is don't let the criticism stop you. That's the big thing. If you see somebody who doesn't know you and doesn't have any clue how to talk, just say this is bad and then that's it. Then throw it out. Don't let it hurt you. Don't let it dent your armor. That's not valuable. If somebody has something valuable to say, if you're able to, engage in a conversation and try to pull something valuable out of that, and then make it constructive. Make it constructive. Even stuff that you don't necessarily want to hear. And most criticism, even if we might agree with it and look back and say, it wasn't as good as it could have been, we don't always want to hear it. But it's all about how we choose to perceive it and what we choose to do and how we run with that criticism. Because criticism is supposed to help. Constructive criticism is supposed to help, and on good days it does.
So I agree with everything that's been said thus far. I would add on to this that you have the power to choose what criticism you receive versus what you ignore. I'm a poet, and I know that poetry is not everybody's cup of tea. And I've had many people before be like, well, I don't like this, or I don't like that. And some of it's been very valid, but at the end of the day, I don't want to sabotage my own writing and it being an extension of me for the sake of applying all criticism, because I don't think that is going to do you any justice as a writer. And I would probably say the other thing is, realizing that once you do find the audience that you've been looking for, that audience is going to stick with you and uplift you, and they will be the ones who will be able to provide you that meaningful, constructive feedback that's going to help you grow.
No, it's very much a similar thing where, yeah, when I get the negative comments, I have a good cry, but it really is up to you to find the constructive criticism in it, because most people can't communicate well online. So sometimes, they have these complaints, there may be a kernel of truth there that you have to decipher through. So yeah, take that dent to rebuild yourself a little bit if you have to, and keep going stronger, focus on the positive, and if there is something in there that you could, oh, maybe they're right, I have been feeling that too, I can work on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, this is just the effect of when you get out there with your work. You're going to have two extremes. You're going to find people who are going to love your work, you're going to find people who hate your work. That's the reality. You're going to find that, and you're going to have all the folks in between. So yeah, the thing is just kind of sum up and just see all this as a tool rather than as a personal attack when you come across criticism, and see, okay, try to gauge the vibe of what they're responding to. Then you look at your work, it's like, oh, okay, I can see where I can touch things up a bit. Like, I got criticism that some people felt that two of my monsters were being too anthropomorphic. Thank you. I got my English teacher here to help me out. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just dial it back for the next book, because now animals do communicate with each other. When you watch animal videos, like, okay, let's dial it back and kind of find another way of doing what I'm doing without, creating that sort of discomfort for the reader. But otherwise, as far as dealing with it, another way I look at it as a tool, aside from engaging with my own work. So like I said, never take anything personal, even when they get, throwing 4-letter words at you, try to be a little bit, it's just words. They don't know you, you don't know them. Just ignore that aspect of the criticism. But let's say once you get your books out there on some kind of market, and where that allows reviews to be posted, actually negative reviews can be handy, because if all you get is 5-star reviews, that's not signaling to the customer that you just got your friends in there reviewing it, and there's been no real readers looking at it. Yeah, you can at least get a couple of negative to counterbalance the good ones, then kind of think from the customer's perspective, saying when you're out there, you're looking to buy something, you see, okay, you're always going to find some people who are not going to like that product, but there's a few who do, and you kind of counterbalance it. And so like I said, it's kind of a way that they're kind of a bit of a tool for selling your book, because it makes the good comments look legitimate, I can repeat myself, but I said that's the best thing to do, is just keep all feedback, good or bad. It's a tool.
All right, you in the back, you have been working really hard to get your question answered. You're switching between arms and everything.
I have some questions, but it is a point. If you like some of the things you write, like Paul Williams, Godzilla, and those things, and put it together for and write a story about it, or make a comic, or graphic novel, or a movie, or series, you might need permission from those who made it, right?
If you're working with
Like
copyrighted material, generally speaking, yes. Unless you're Danny, you just don't make any money out of it.
My project, my perspective on that, and I think Donnie's probably the best person to answer that here, because he has official Toho cred. I'm clapping for that, actually. There you go. My experience with that is relatively minimal, because yeah, Godzilla's name is on my project, but I am operating, it's not, what I do is not quite fan fiction, but it's operating under the, what I like to call the please don't sue me fan fiction principle, where the books that I work on, they're published, they're serialized one chapter at a time on the website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. They're there. That's not self-promotion, it's an answer to the question. Let's put your hat out there. The thing is, I mean, if I wanted to, yeah, maybe I could do a limited print run and hand them out for free somewhere. But I don't even want to do that, and that's not only because I respect Toho and I love what they do, and I don't want to do anything that's not legal. I also really don't want C&Ds filling up my mailbox. I don't want cease and desist letters. I really don't want Toho. I love Toho. Their lawyers are scary. These are frightening people.
From the creators, the companies, who made the mangas, the anime, movies, and those things. You need permission from those if you want all the sort of fuse into one. It's something you like if you want.
Yeah, listen, if Toho came knocking at my door and they said, hey, you want to make this legitimate, after regaining consciousness, I would say yes immediately. That would be my ultimate, that would be a dream. That would be a remarkable thing to have happen. But as of right now, again, my perspective is that I do this for free. The books are online, available to free. I don't charge people because I can't and won't. And I supplement it through Patreon. So I've never actually dealt with Toho to work on this. It's just purely a passion project that I'm doing when I have the time, and it's been very fulfilling. You know, it's not about the money necessarily.
So even though I have a Godzilla cred currently, I did not work directly with Toho. That's the publisher's job and their teams. So if you end up finding a publisher, that would be something that they would have to facilitate. Do you want to hear a cringy story? When I was a kid, I used to write Godzilla fan fiction all the time. And I started my writing career writing Godzilla fan fiction, so do not ever let anybody tell you that fan fiction sucks. It is valid.
Amen to that. That's true.
I wrote some Godzilla fan fiction too.
Absolutely. Most of us probably have. So I sent a letter. I was like 14. I sent this horrible letter to Toho. And I was like, hey, I write these Godzilla fanfics. Can I publish them? Blah, 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 blah. They sent me this really thoughtful letter in response. They were like, oh, you, pat, pat, pat. But no. But it's like, there are, if you do make connections and you do end up connecting with a publisher or press, like they will have a team that works on things like that, on licensing. But keep in mind, Godzilla is very expensive. If it's not something like on the scale of IDW publishing, the small press is probably going to be like, we don't have anybody.
All right. You with the hair.
How is it adapting the characters to other people and doing it without worrying about messing up the characters?
That's a good one. You want to go first?
I would love to go first. It's so worrying and antagonizing. There's so much red tape. I mean, we barely just started doing. I work with the Kaiju Cel Cast, who have been very generous, and half their roster, they don't really have much backstory for their characters, so I came in and added a bunch of backstory, and they just go, cool. But actually this year they have a new license for Weekly World News. You guys remember the tabloid with Batboy and whatnot? That became more of a headache because we had to go through them and the Kaiju Assault guys, as myself and my artist. At one point, we had gotten some stuff done. We sent it in, and they go, "Oh no, you can't do that," and we just flipped out. Because we had to be creative, we had to figure out workarounds. So it's a lot of red tape. Ultimately, be respectful for their characters. I mean, most of the time we're licensing characters because we love them as well, so we don't want to necessarily just trash them at all. We want to have their legacy. It really just becomes a back and forth of respect and just compromise.
I would agree completely with that, especially in the context of Godzilla. Like, I think it was mentioned during the Godzilla -1 panel yesterday that Toho is really worried about the legacy now, right? So like, they really care about this character. They will give a list of specifications. In fact, I'm fairly sure you said that in the panel, so I'm quoting you. But like, they really care about this character and they want the character represented well. So usually you'll get a list of specifications of like, the character would not do this, the character would do this, right? And you want to adhere to those to the best of your ability.
And again, my perspective is a little off because I am working with these characters, but I'm not doing it in an official capacity. I'm doing it as part of a passion project. And in a situation like that, my main thrust in that way, like my main source of energy is respect. I don't have Toho breathing down my neck telling me I can do things and can't do things. And if they were, I would obviously adhere because they're the masters of this. But for me, I have to rely solely on how much I love and respect the character and the other monsters, and even more than that, the people who made these films. Now clearly, this is just a fun fan thing that I do, that I love so much, but I take it seriously, and I think about how, you know, if Ishiro Honda were alive and he happened to grab something I wrote that involved one of his films, what would he think? Would anything that I wrote in prose or any words I put into a character's mouth be a betrayal of the script or the original intention or the original mood or the original, the metaphor or the fun? Anything that was put into those films, I take that ridiculously seriously for the sake of my own love for this stuff, other people's love, and for the people who made these films who aren't here anymore to tell me if I'm right or wrong. I have to think about what they did. I mean, when I write these books, I'm looking at shot composition and lighting, and I'm trying to figure out how I can honor that in prose, which is possible. It is not easy, and I try my darndest, because at the end of the day, what I do is fun for me, and I hope to God it's fun for other people. If I can do that, then I've done my job. But I also wanted to honor this guy. And I want to honor the people who made the films, wrote the stories that I'm stepping into. You know, they did all the hard. I like to say they did all the hard work, and I'm standing on the shoulders of literal giants. And again, not in an official capacity, but I still take it as seriously as I can because he deserves it.
All right, go ahead. Again, most popular guy in the room. Anyway, you've been working really hard to get your question asked.
So when it comes to adaptations of your works into things like comics, because when it's working that, I do comics myself, and I've been told by my art professor that working with the original concept for the books, you have to work very, very, very hand in hand to get that. Is there any experiences you guys have with working with completely different media to get a story out?
Huh? Oh, that's a good point. You're asking what we do to adapt our stories from one medium to another? Is that what you're saying? Okay. So I think that we've all had at least a little bit of experience with doing something like that. We've worked with different mediums. I'm learning how to write a comic book right now, so you're a little ahead of me in that regard, even though I've read comics most of my life. I would say that for me, the medium that I've worked with most with translating from one form to another would be from prose to audio, because I've written a lot of audio scripts for the podcast, and I'm working on a standalone audio drama right now for Scythering Productions that does such things as Power Rangers the audio drama, X-Men the audio drama. I'm doing a standalone for their Power Rangers show. So learning how to, in that case, it's to a certain extent, it's translating from television to audio form. So you have to be sensitive to certain things, because obviously you don't have a visual component to go with it. And I've had to learn that the hard way. Just to give a quick example, and then I'm going to pass it on to anyone else who wants to comment on it. Initially, when I was writing audio drama scripts, I tried my darndest to avoid using a narrator because I didn't like the intrusiveness of it, and I thought, I can write the characters that I like in such a way and add appropriate enough sound effects that I don't need to lead into that. And I have since learned that doesn't work as well as I thought. Either that or I just have not achieved a high enough level of talent to make that work yet. So, I've adjusted my writing in that regard, although I still try to minimize the amount of narration as much as I can, because I would rather let the performances of the actors and the sound effects carry that.
So, speaking in the context of the Godzilla 70th Anniversary Edition, Matt, Frank, and I did the In the Shadow of God story, and that was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done, because Matt wanted me to write poems to develop the character that's in the actual story. I've written comic book scripts before and things like that, but I've never written poetry for a comic book, so that was kind of a very unique challenge. So the thing that I had to think of the most was the point of view. All right. So when you were representing someone on the page or something on the page, like what is the point of view that you want to convey? How elaborate do you want to be? So like in a lot of comic book writing, like you don't have a lot of space in which to write. So you have to be concise, you have to be direct. But the nice thing about the poetry is that it has allowed I'm hoping the audience to kind of see that something is being withheld just a little bit for the suspense factor.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, Donny, you'll appreciate this. One of the best descriptions of comic book writing I ever heard was that it was equal parts poetry and journalism.
I'll jump on there because, again, with the GMP, it's translating visuals into prose. So it's a movie into a book. And we already kind of talked a little bit about how that works and how translating the visuals goes, so I won't repeat myself there. But what I will say is if you're doing something the example that I will use is I'm going to actually step outside of Godzilla for a second. When I'm not, hosting G-Fest panels and writing Godzilla books, I am a professional writer by day. I'm a marketing writer, and the main thing of what I do is actually I write audio. I write audio marketing, and when you do that, you absolutely have to pay attention to how you write, because if you write in a way that somebody can't talk, then it's going to sound horrible when it's recorded. The stuff that I do, I typically work on a mixture of straight and actually comedic humor copy. I write humor copy. I get to write humor skits at my job, funny marketing. And you have to be, especially with humor, you have to be concise. And you have to make sure that everything you write translate, because I'm not writing for visuals, I'm writing for the ear. So that's a good example. If you ever find yourself writing something that's going to be spoken, maybe you're writing a script for a character in a YouTube video, YouTube series, or you have an audio drama like Nate was talking about, number one rule is read the darn thing out loud, and if you find yourself tripping over it, and read it to other people too, and ask other people who you trust to read it as well. And if they trip over it, and if you trip over it, then you've written something for the eye and not for the ear. So if you're going to jump mediums like that, and especially if you're going to write a movie script, that also works. Don't write something that is just for reading. It's not a novel, it's not a comic. It has to be something that the ear can hear right, and something that a performer can speak accurately. Because if it doesn't sound right, we hear it. How many times have you watched a commercial or heard something, and all you can think to yourself is, that's a script somebody's reading. This isn't real. It's not authentic.
Yeah, most of the trailers narrating the Penguins readings.
Well, yeah, a little. It's a thing, and it all comes back to authenticity. You have to be authentic to the medium and authentic to the people who are going to be hearing it, and respectful of them.
Yeah. Just one quick anecdote. Read everything that you write out loud, because the ear's going to pick up on things that the eye won't. Just saying. You're in the corner. You've had your hand up for a while.
Hey, sorry, I'm a librarian, so I have to ask very boring, very practical questions.
We're here for those two.
If anyone here is a new writer, right? They want to start out. What are the most friendly venues that you've worked with, or places that you recommend they start? And then the second question is, aside from the people on that panel, who would you recommend people read if they want to write
Okay, just a clarification, when you say venue, what are you talking about? Places to publish, places to have book signings, what are we talking about?
Places to publish.
Places to publish. If you are interested in self-publishing, and I think, Neil, you and I can vouch for this, the go-to place right now, there's other options, but the go-to place right now is Kindle Direct Publishing. Because that is, it's owned by Amazon now, and it's easily the largest one. It has has the most distribution. You have other options like Lulu.com is still around, and I check on them occasionally because I used to self-publish with them. And they've expanded their network, I think, to compete with KDP. And then there's also Smashwords, but Smashwords is strictly ebooks, and I think they're trying to upgrade themselves right now, but they're kind of getting lost in the shuffle with the other options, especially with powerhouses like KDP and Lulu. I don't hear much about Smashwords hardly at all anymore. Yep.
Yeah, well, I work with Amazon, and one thing I really like about them is that it's so easy. Where first of all, you don't have to pay anything to get your book published through Amazon, and secondly, they handle all the taxes for you, which is really nice. For example, since their markets are worldwide, they handle all the value-added taxes and stuff that have to be collected, when they get sold in different countries and different regions. And then at the end of the year, they provide you a 1099 whistle form to show what your actual profits are. You hand that to the IRS, you're done. It's no more complicated than that. You don't have to worry about being audited later on or anything like that sort of thing. So yeah, Amazon is a very easy thing to go through. And I know there's other venues too, but I think some of those you have to pay like a fee, like a membership fee. Which and then you figure, okay, you're an independent author, how many copies are you going to sell? Probably not a lot. So almost any expense is going to make it almost self-defeating as far as finance. You start creating yourself a big money pit. That's why I go through Amazon. There's practically no overhead.
Yeah, and if you want to go the traditional publishing route, which is still viable now, you can try going for the big boys. if you want, your tours and your phantoms and things like that. Some would tell you like start at the top and work your way down, but if you're just starting out, you're most likely gonna have a better chance with a smaller publishing house, and I've worked with several. This was published by Wildland Press. This was published by Bear Manor Media, and I've worked with a few other ones, just to give a couple quick examples.
Only thing is, if you go through small press, like you're not going to handle the taxes yourself. You have to keep track of all the checks you receive. You have to basically report all those. You're probably not going to have a very handy tax form that has everything all totaled up for you once you get paper. So I used to go through small press. I just quit because it's just the kind of all the, what do you want to call that, the administrative work you have to do behind the scenes is just,
We're writers, we don't like paperwork.
Yes, that's right. We're not tax accountants. We're creators. So that's why I steered away from small press. And I do work with Wildland, but I tell them don't send me a check.
And, just to remind us, what was your second question?
Aside from the people on the panel, who are writers that you would recommend reading if you wanted to get started?
Oh, I can grab that one real quick if you don't mind. One person I would strongly recommend is Harlan Ellison. Just like Donnie, he kind of summed it up. Verbs are your friend. And so, I'm going to give you a little anecdote of my own life here as far as trying to figure out learn how to do that whole thing of writing. And so I was reading, of course, professional books, and there was one I read by Tanith Lee. I thought she was a fantasy story. I thought, well, this is a very interesting subject matter, but I'll keep on falling asleep when I get through one paragraph. And Harlan Ellison, I read one of his short stories, was about a car chase. I'm not a car chase fan, but I found myself just flipping through the pages. I was like, well, I don't understand it. I mean, Tanith Lee is a more interesting subject matter, but she's putting me to sleep. And so I was kind of studying the sentences between the two. And Tanith Lee used a lot of passive verbs, and like was, were, is. And whereas Harlan Ellison used a lot of action verbs, punch, stomp, kick, whatever. And I realized, okay, so really the verb is really the heart of your story, because the verb actually paints the picture. It actually paints a better picture than the adjectives and adverbs. Because you can always picture someone running. I say, I use the word run, you all got a picture of what that looks like. And so that's what I would strongly recommend reading Harlan Ellison, because it's fantastic prose.
Yeah, and actually something that I recommend, this isn't something specific. Harlan Ellison's a great choice, but I would also recommend definitely read for the genre that you're interested in. Sorry, it's a hot mic. But also, I would say read a lot of different things, because you might find that you'll need that to integrate into your story. I would even say, you'll appreciate this, Donnie. Read poetry. Poetry will really
Do it.
Yeah, poetry will really teach you how to master the English language. I actually took several poetry classes in grad school for that reason. I wasn't necessarily aspiring to be a poet. I can't compete with Donnie, but I wanted to be like, if I can understand this, I can work that into my prose and really have command over my prose. So there's a lot that you can glean from reading different things.
Well, in that case, I'll recommend a poetry collection that I is currently hearing. So, for my second collection of poems, Feats of Alchemy, which has a lot of Kaiju influences in it, and sci-fi in general, I read a poem collection titled Cyborgia by Susan Slaviero. A stunning poem collection. And I think as a writer, you often get inspired by the people you love. So always revisit those pieces or those books that you love. So, because that will keep you free from writer's block, but it will also keep you motivated too.
I'll throw in one of my personal favorites, Dean Koontz. Grab a Dean Koontz novel. One of the reasons I love Dean Koontz, I could go on and on, but one of the reasons I love Dean Koontz and why he's an influence on me is because I feel that he writes incredibly cinematically. I've never encountered an author who paints a film-esque picture in my head as beautifully as Dean Koontz does in his thrillers. And he's a jack of all trades. He writes horror stories, he writes thrillers, he writes mystery, all kinds of amazing stuff. There's not a single word that man has written that I don't adore. And so he's always in the back of my head, because I am, again, like for this project specifically, outside of other short stories I've worked on for the G&P, like I am trying to work within something that already has cinema baked into its bones. So I can write cinematically, then I feel like that complements recreating the visual in your head from the movie as best as I can with my own word choice. So Dean Koontz is awesome.
All right, I think we're going to go a little over time because we were delayed. I think we might have time for one or two more questions. I
saw a little hand in the back corner there. There we go. Hey. What's your question?
What was the first book we ever read?
The first book we ever wrote? Okay.
What year was it? How old were you? And what was the book style?
Okay, we'll go down the line.
Yeah, you can go ahead and start, Neil.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, this is my first book right here. And I wrote this, I don't even remember what I put out.
Into the microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. I'm very professional.
There's a voice.
Yeah, right here is my first one, I Shall Not Make. And I had to do math. Let's see, I think this came out in 2019. So I started in 2017. So 2019, I might have been 50, 49, somewhere in that department when I got this one out.
Old guard.
Yeah.
All right, I don't have my first published novel up on the table here, but I do have copies with me if you want to see it afterward. It was called Pandora's Box. It's military science fiction, and that was published in 2010, if I remember correctly. And doing the math, I was 27.
So the first G&P story specifically that I started writing was an adaptation of the 1954 Godzilla. And that would have been in 2018, which meant I was, 24, 25 around the time. And then after that, the first completed short story I got published was actually only about 30 years ago, when I was maybe 27, 28. It was a Kaiju short story that was published in the now defunct Kaiju Ramen magazine called Prelude to Resurrection, which is actually a story that on one level or another had been stuck in my head since I was in 4th grade. It's a story that I wrote in my head and wrote out various versions of since I was maybe 9, 10 years old. And I used to make models from it as a kid, and I would reenact it and develop the plot. And I finally got a chance to take this childhood dream and turn it into a thing. Now, unfortunately, the magazine that it's in is no longer available. It cannot be purchased, but I'm hoping that by this time next year, it will be a part of a self-published short story collection that I'm putting together of original stories. So I'm hoping to get it back out into the world along with some eclectic other original stories. I have a pile of short stories I've written that have no home, so hopefully next year it'll be one of a couple books I can put up in front of everyone. So, thank you so much for your question, by the way.
Yes, thank you for that question. Just for fun, my first Godzilla fan fiction I wrote in 2002, and it was titled The Return of Batra, because Batra deserves more love, in my opinion. I was 14 years old. My first published book is titled Carbon Footprint. It's a poem collection, and it was released in 2020 during the pandemic, and I don't know how old I was, 31, I guess.
The first book I finished, finally, was 2012, Larry Rhodes and the Perils of the Fantasy Stars. So then at that point, started rolling out other books. And we're still going. So it's been 12 years on. How old were you? 23, 24, 23, 24, something like that.
Now there's one thing I want to point out before we move on here, because we might be able to squeeze one more in. That's a wide breadth of ages that you just heard. A very, very wide breadth, which if there's ever been any proof that it doesn't particularly matter how old you are or what stage of your life you're in, you can pick up a pen, whether it's a real pen or metaphorical pen, and you can start to write and create at any time, any age of your life. There's no too late, there's no too early. You can be in grade school, you can be in a nursing home, it doesn't matter. Grab a pen if the urge strikes you and just write. Just do it.
All right, we'll take a final question, so make it a good one. Really quick. Oh my gosh, so many hands. Background? What? Oh, I didn't. Never mind. Yeah. You, sir.
One thing that's what criminally said about the movies is that Godzilla or other projects definitely not have screen time. So how do you handle that in your own purpose?
Are you talking about how much quote-unquote screen time in our stories we give to the monsters?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Quick answer for me, it really depends on the kind of story that you're telling. I have read some stories, whether they be prose or comic books, where they're focused on the monsters, and there's a particular style that comes with that. But if like -1, for example, we all love that, we all adore that movie, and Godzilla's got maybe 10, 12 minutes of screen time in it because we're invested in the characters and how Godzilla is affecting their lives. So it really depends on the story.
Yeah, screen time doesn't have a darn thing to do with a good story. A monster needs to be in a film as much or as little as it needs to be to honor the story and the plot and the rest of the characters and the progression. So honestly, Nate's answer is mine as well. Just as much as the story needs, not a second more or less.
Story is king.
Yes. Anybody else have anything to add to that, or are we set to get out of here? I think we're getting kicked out. So sorry to everybody whose questions we didn't get to, but thank you so much for coming out. Go and write something.
And don't forget, you're interested in reading a free book, I'll be right outside the door, first 10 people.
And if you would like to, if you didn't get your question answered, you want to come talk to us anywhere in the con, please come see us.
Yeah, I'm floating down at Kaiju Island. Come on downstairs.
When you get the end.